Good morning, dear friends and fellow gardeners. This morning I was just out and about in the garden and I thought that I would share just a simple walkthrough of what's going on in the garden. So in the early spring, this garden looks very barren. Everything is flat and lifeless except for the evergreen bushes that you see in the background there. Everything looks brown and just to the soil. But right now we see leftovers of the spring flowers, the tulips. They're gone. Well, they're fading actually. These are the last ones of the tulips in the garden. I planted them over a coral bell, which is now blooming very beautifully. So these tulips and the coral bells are planted last autumn, and the hyacinths are all gone. The hyacinths have produced, some of them have produced like little seed heads like this, but they have withered now, so I didn't bother deadheading them. But otherwise I like to deadhead them, hoping that they would come back again next year or next spring. And here are my roses. They are doing wonderful. So the roses took a little bit of a beating this past winter. The snow was very heavy on them and the wind. I didn't protect these roses, so as a result there were a lot of branches that were broken. So I had to cut them down 1 feet. So the leftover after I cut them down was just about 1 feet above the ground, but now they are kicking back again. And this is a Canadian shield and it looks like it's blooming very nicely and thicker than it did before. And this is a Ragusa rose. I want to say it's twice as thick as it was last year. So this is their 3rd year now in the garden. No, I'm sorry. Yes, their 3rd year. I planted them at the onset of the pandemic. So these are all pandemic babies. So there's 3 roses right there. I have alliums. They're cousins to onions. And I also planted this at the fall following the pandemic. And they grew back. So pretty awesome to have flowers come back every year. I didn't expect they would come back anymore, but they did. These are globe flowers. They're yellow and they will soon bloom completely. After they bloom, they will fade away and the foliage would look dry and withered. It would look dead and unappealing. But again, planted at the onset of the pandemic, and it's still here every year. This is a black-eyed Susan. The black-eyed Susan reseeds very generously. There's babies here, and I removed the leaves one time because I don't want them to crowd out the roses. The roots remained on the ground, so they sprouted again. Very resilient. More roses down here. These roses are miniature roses that I have divided. So those little roses that you see at the grocery store being sold as gifts in little pots, if you look closely, there'd be 4 to 6 little plants in one pot. I separated them, and so those 3 there are doing well. I think this little one here is being crowded, but it's still going, and it has little bud coming out now. Some of its branches have died. These columbines, I planted them early spring last year, so they didn't have time to bloom last year. They just grew flowers, I mean leaves, but so I guess they needed the time to acclimate into their surroundings. And this spring, look how lovely they are. This one is the plant that the yellow one gets the least amount of sunlight because of the rose, and then more sunlight as we go to the back. And it seems that the one that gets the most sunlight is doing the best. Or it might also be because of the variety, because this seems to be 3 varieties of columbine right here. These have double petals, which are very pretty. And I have another rose right here. All the roses that you see here are all pandemic babies. And I have 3 blueberries here. I got to harvest some of these last year, but because I wait for them to ripen really well before I harvest them, a lot of times the birds gets to them before I do, which is fine. I like the birds. I would set up bird feeders for them, but it would be nice to get organic blueberries, right? And these papier poppies, I think that's what they're called, Chinese poppies. A lot of the flowers have faded now, so what I usually do is I cut off these seed heads so that they don't produce seeds at the moment. It's too early to produce seeds. Well, I guess it depends on your priorities. My priorities is to have more blooms. So to have more blooms, we have to remove the seed heads so that the energy of the plant can get concentrated on producing flowers. Again, these were planted in early spring last year, and they're here again. How awesome is that? Over here I have more tulips. These were planted last fall. Hyacinths, they're saying goodbye now. They're planted among the roses. I welcome tips so as to care for this area of the garden. My goal is to have these tulips come back again next year, because 2 falls ago I planted tulips by the peonies there, and they didn't come back. The bulbs just rot away underneath the soil, so hopefully that won't happen with these ones, and they would come back again next spring. This is Italian ice rose. I have 3 of them, and there was a big branch here that was broken, and I just stuck them on the ground, and it looks like we're gonna have another bush growing out from there. Right. The sedums are doing very well. I will have to tie up the peonies soon because they're very rich in flowers, and those flowers becomes really heavy, so we'll have to tie them up. I also have a cocktail rose. The best thing about these roses are they're rated for Zone 4 gardens. What that means is you don't really have to protect them from the cold in the winter, and they will come back every year, which has proven to be true so far. Well, I have one die here. It started to sprout and grow buds actually, and then it just faded away. I'm not sure what happened here. Something ate its roots. Roses are perennial bushes that have what you call this warranty from the nursery. So in cases like this, it died on me, I could have taken the receipt to the store and get a replacement or get my money back. I didn't know that, so I don't have my receipt anymore. It looks like I couldn't claim for it, but lessons learned. Keep all your receipts for your perennials because they carry a 1-year guarantee. More roses. I went roses crazy, as you can see. The roses on the further side of the garden now were planted at the onset of the pandemic, and they did really well. So last year I planted more. I have Sonorita rose here, and I forgot what they're called now. At the back with the red leaves, that's called Love Rose. And I planted that on my wedding anniversary last year. So I particularly chose the rose that was called Love. And more miniature roses. Last year when they were new, these miniature roses had really beautiful peach flowers. But we'll see if they would still produce those nice peach flowers this year. Some of them didn't make it, like this one, kaput. But most of them did. Like this one, very tiny, but it's alive, so very nice, isn't it? Last summer I filled this space with dahlias. It was a last minute decision, very late in the fall when I planted these roses. That's why the small ones didn't have time to get settled, and maybe that's why I lost them. There's also baby lilies here. We'll see if they'd be able to grow this year, and lilacs. The lilacs are just about to bloom. Back over to this side. So we have a lawn, natural lawn. We planted grass here last year, but I guess the grass wasn't resilient enough and it's overrun by weeds now. These pansies I planted last year in the spring, and I didn't plant new ones, this year. This just came out by themselves, so very nice. And there's some that are seeding just outside the flower bed. So I think I'm gonna dig this up and move them to the flower bed before my husband mows the lawn. I guess you could say I do like the dandelions until they turn like this. That's why we don't really bother very much about mowing the lawn in the springtime. I kind of like these fuzzy things. Mulching your garden, by the way, with compost, which is free from the city, is very nice for the garden. It provides nutrients, and at the same time it prevents dandelion seeds from sprouting. See, there's no baby dandelions on this bed. This is a magnolia. It bloomed beautifully in the spring. This is its first year in the garden. Another magnolia here. I have some pansies regrow from this bed also. Not as much as the other bed, but there they are. So that's it for my little walkthrough in the garden. This is how it looks now, and every day it keeps changing. Soon the flowers from spring will fade away, but the roses will start blooming. So this year I didn't buy a lot of plants. Actually, I just bought 2 pots of dahlias and a new peony called Moscow and a rose of Sharon. Those are the only ones that are new that will be planted this summer. I didn't buy anything else because last year I did splurge a lot on this garden, and husband ended up paying a lot. So this year we are going to save some money and not spend so much on this garden. And actually I have a project going on in the backyard as well that I also need to work on. Lots of things to do there, and it's being overgrown by weeds, so it has to be taken care of very soon. Just want to show you the little rose. Very nice, isn't it? I guess that would make up for the rose that we lost from the winter time. Later on, these sedums will grow and produce broccoli-like flowers, which are green, and then they will bloom to be purplish red as autumn approaches. And they'll be tall, about 1.5 feet tall. More roses right here. These are also miniature roses from the garden or the grocery store. There'll be lilies growing there. And these are coneflowers. Something's eating the coneflowers. Not sure what. And coral bells. So in this garden, thankfully there's not a lot of pests that needs to be controlled, except for the red beetles that are eating the lilies. I don't have any problems like slugs and things like that that eats the garden. Maybe because it's not really vegetative, so we don't have that problem. In here I have a rhododendron. This rhododendron has been here for years and years and years, and it remained very little like that. It's being overgrown by more peonies. This is the garden. There'll be lots of lilies on this side right here. They're still young. So I have Asiatic lilies here, Oriental lilies, day lilies. This is the love rose. It's doing well. I have a Judy Garland rose, not doing very well. Some of the branches have died, and from the root there's only one branch that has been growing, so it's still alive. Hopefully from that one branch we'll have a full-grown rose. There's a Rugusa rose. This is a baby now, I think. A separate plant from Sorry about the sound. We live close by the road. So that's a baby plant that's growing from this mother plant right here. This mother plant has been really bushy last year. So I pruned it, I removed some branches, and I shortened it just so I could keep it in smaller size. Thank you so much for watching my channel and sharing the joy of gardening with me. I hope that you have a wonderful year in your garden, full of beautiful flowers. And if you plant vegetables, may you have a lot of food to eat.